Okay. I lived and worked in Yosemite National Park for 3 months, and while I was there, I got very, very sick. This is almost a part 2 to my last video where I talked about what it was like to live and work in Yosemite National Park. I talked about what my job was, what I did on my days off, and overall explained that it was a good experience. Unfortunately, that wasn't the entire story. While I was there, I had a mysterious sickness, and this video is not to scare anyone off or put anyone on blast, but I think it's worth talking about. I know I learned a lot, and I think you could learn something from this too. Let's just start from the very beginning. So when I first got there, I went into the housing department, and it was pretty clear that things were a little crazy. A lot of people were moving in that day. We got a tour of our tent, and I remember the person who was giving us the tour saying, "Oh, by the way, there's a problem with the floor over in that corner, but don't worry, we'll get it fixed." Thought nothing of it. A month went by. I was finally settling into my job, doing a bunch of cool stuff on my days off, until one day we saw our first mouse. Now, I'm not scared of mice. They're like this big. They're actually really cute. But seeing a mouse in Yosemite is like really not a good thing. Yosemite makes it very clear to everyone who visits and everyone who works there that the mice in Yosemite, specifically deer mice, carry a virus called Hanta or Hanta. I tried to look up how to pronounce it, but it looks like it's a mix of both. I like to call it Hanta because it's like spooky, and trust me, it's spooky. It was not fun. So Hanta it is, Hanta if you like. And it starts off as very severe flu symptoms, but then it can actually become life-threatening. I'm not a doctor, so you can look it up on your own, but I would just say whatever you look up is not good. And it can be transmitted to humans through the air when you stir up the droppings or the urine up into the air and then you breathe it in. Or you can touch something that's contaminated and touch like your eyes or your nose or your mouth, all the things that you don't want a virus or mouse poop. So pretty much you don't want to be anywhere near the mice in Yosemite, and you definitely don't want to be living with them. But at the time it was only one mouse. We went to the housing department. They didn't seem concerned, so we weren't concerned. They gave us a couple mouse traps and we set them. We caught the mouse. I was the one who disposed of the mouse, but unfortunately that wasn't the only mouse. We started getting more mice, and at this point in time we were probably seeing one mouse a day. Also at this point in time, we kind of thought we were to blame because Yosemite has a lot of rules about not bringing any food into the tent, and that's for a couple reasons. Mostly for bears, because you don't want a bear coming into your tent, and then also the mouse problem. You don't want any mice carrying hantavirus to come into your tent. And we weren't like actively breaking this rule, but I think one of the things that maybe we could have done differently is that a lot of us would come home in the dark, either like 11 or midnight. So while we would make our food in the kitchen and also store our food in the kitchen and our bear box, we would often eat the food in the tent and then take our dirty dishes and bowls and stuff to the kitchen. Because again, it's really late when we were getting home, and you're not exactly going to be wanting to eat food in the middle of the woods in the pitch black outside of your tent. So to me, that seems a little excessive to not be able to even eat anything in there. Like, I guess you might have crumbs or something. But I think we were still following the rule pretty much. So we really cracked down on the food, and we thought the mice would go away. Also at this point, we had used all of the traps that killed the mice, like the classic traps from the housing department. And while we could have asked for more, we had a neighbor that gave us one of those live traps, so we could just keep reusing it every day. Looking back, that obviously wasn't the smartest decision. And if I would have known what happened next, I definitely would have went for the kill traps. But hindsight is 2020. I just don't think live traps are the best option when these mice are actually dangerous to humans. Those traps kind of require a little bit more hand-to-hand contact to let the mouse out, so you're touching the trap a lot more. And obviously, every time that you set one loose, there is the possibility that it will come right back. And somehow I ended up being the tent dad and was the one that was largely disposing of all these mice. And at the time I thought I was doing it right. I was washing my hands really good. Again, just trying to be as sanitary as I could. I didn't have gloves, but I definitely was not like breathing in the trap. In hindsight, I probably should have been wearing a mask and gloves. But yeah, here we are. So while I was having a lot more contact with the mice than the average person and my roommates, there is definitely one specific scenario that really stands out to me that might have been where my doom started, and that was because one time I dropped my pillow on the ground. You can see all of the dirt and dust and debris that was on our floors, but I was feeling gracious and I wanted to sweep the floors for me and my roommates so that the next time when I dropped my pillow on the ground, it wouldn't be disgusting. So I remember I took a broom from the kitchen. I swept out like a pound of dirt. And looking back, that is something I should not have done. In fact, if you look up Hanta, the only way that you are supposed to clean up mouse droppings from deer mice is any type of wet cleaning where you aren't putting any dust or droppings up into the air. You are not supposed to sweep or vacuum, and that is exactly what I did. You can't really pinpoint when I got the virus, but that might have been it. That was definitely something I did exclusively that my roommates did not. My roommates did not get Hanta, so I don't know. That's just throwing that out there. So then I started getting very, very sick. And the symptoms were very much flu-like, with the worst one being the chills. I have never had chills like that in my life. And in the beginning, I wasn't that worried because I thought I had COVID. And I've never had COVID before, so I didn't really have anything to compare it to. But there were a lot of us living in this small little tent community. We all shared a bathroom. We all shared a kitchen. And I'm the type of person that kind of overthinks when I start feeling sick. So I drove all the way into the town that was closest, that had a clinic, and I could get a COVID test. And that was 2 hours away. And keep in mind, I feel like crap. So I drive 2 hours there. And this was kind of its own story. I'll just tell it quickly. But I got there. They told me it was going to be a 2 hour wait. And I was like, that's fine. I took the day off to be here. I want to know if I have COVID. I don't want to get a bunch of people sick. So no big deal. 2 hours later, they take me into the back room and they forgot about me. Someone came in to clean the room. And they were like, oh my God, why are you still here? And I was like, I haven't been seen yet. I was there for 4.5 hours. I only had like 5 minutes to chat with this doctor. I told them how I was living in Yosemite. And at the time, Hanta hadn't even crossed my mind in the slightest because we had been told like it's so rare. There's no way. So for some reason, they gave me antibiotics. I'm not even sure what they gave me antibiotics for. And then they handed me like 10 COVID tests to take back to Yosemite with me. I got back to Yosemite. I took the tests. Obviously, it was negative. So I'm taking the antibiotics and they're not helping because I don't need them. I had already taken a couple of days off of work. I didn't really know what to do. I thought the antibiotics would kick in eventually. That night, I took a turn for the absolute worst. I woke up at 2 a.m. that night and I was shivering so hard. All I wanted to do was get into my backpacking gear, get out my sleeping bag, put it on, and just cry. It was horrible. My muscles were so achy, I couldn't even walk to the bathroom. I didn't have a thermometer at the time, so I'm not sure how bad my temperature was at that point. But I knew that when I wanted to get into my sleeping bag, when I had 2 heaters in the tent at full blast, this was not a normal fever. So I had to ask my roommate at 2 a.m. if she would take me. It was over an hour away, and luckily she did because I don't know what I would have done. And when I got there, this was the smallest ER I had ever seen. It was like one little tiny waiting room, and luckily nobody else was there, so they got me in right away. The nurse who checked me in was immediately concerned because my temperature was 104, and she was really mad at me because I was like bundled up in a blanket. And I remember I had a hat on, and she was like, pulled the hat off of my head. She's like, why are you wearing all these layers? You have a very high fever. And I guess I knew that you're not supposed to do that, but at the time, I don't know, I just was bundled up and I was making it worse. So they immediately made me take off all my clothes and they got me on an IV. They were incredibly thorough. They asked me a bunch of questions. They also did a chest x-ray. They took blood. They just were amazing. All of the normal tests came back normal, and so after telling them my symptoms and the mouse exposure, they basically told me, you have hantavirus. Now, there's no cure for hantavirus, so there's nothing that they could really do for me other than just get my temperature down, make me feel comfortable, and then also set my mind at ease now that I knew what was going on. They told me if anything got worse or if I couldn't keep my fever down, that I should come back to the hospital. They let me leave and I went back to the valley. And at this point, my roommate who had driven me to the ER was kind of in communications with the housing department and told them that I was at the ER and that it was hantavirus. And they ended up giving us a hantavirus kit, which was a Ziploc bag filled with a mask, some gloves, more mouse traps, and some hand sanitizer. And that was their solution at the time. Also, I had missed quite a bit of work, and so each time that I called in, they gave me kind of a hard time about it. Kind of just the like, oh, okay, well, it will be in your attendance. And I'd be like, okay, I am currently at the ER. I'm sorry, I can't be there. Meanwhile, I'm trying to just get better, but I'm still living in that tent. And the ER doctors pretty much told me that it's probably not the best thing to be living and breathing in all of that contaminated air. So I started sleeping in my van in the parking lot. And if you've seen my van videos, you know that my van is not a luxury van build out. It is very basic. It's basically just a mattress, a toddler mattress in the back of my van. There's no AC, there's no water. I love it a lot, but it was not great for being sick in it. Also keep in mind that it's summertime in the valley, so it's like 90 degrees out and cars can get a lot hotter than that. I'm just roasting alive in the van. I'm trying to stay hydrated. The bathroom is like a walk away. The kitchen is a walk away, so I'm not eating a lot. I'm just having a hard time taking care of myself in the valley because I'm living out of a car in a parking lot. And then one day I started throwing up, and that kind of got me scared. I didn't really have anything to throw up, but I just couldn't keep food down. And the first time I went to the ER, they gave me such peace of mind just being there, talking to a doctor. So I asked someone else to drive me to the ER. Looking back, I should have just went back to the same ER, but somehow I let somebody convince me that I should get a second opinion. And that might be because it still just seemed crazy that I had gotten this like super rare and like hard to get virus from these mice. So we drove to a different ER, and this one was in Fresno, so it was over 2 hours away. And as soon as I got there, I pretty much knew it was a waste of time because the waiting room was so full of people, and it was people that honestly like needed a lot of help. I remember being like, I know that I'm just dehydrated and hungry and tired, and I have something wrong with me, and I'm not really able to take very good care of myself, so no wonder I feel like this. They let me just talk to a doctor, which was great for peace of mind, but they pretty much just told me like, yeah, you are struggling right now. And I was like, yeah, I know. But they did end up getting me a prescription for nausea medicine, which did help. At this point, I had called out of work so much that my manager did pull some strings to get me a few nights in the curry tents. And these are the tents that we rent out to tourists, and they're not micey. They're a lot cleaner. So I definitely needed those nights in the tent earlier, and probably not just 3 of them. But it was still a really nice gesture, and after 2 ER visits and probably 2.5 weeks of feeling horrible, I very slowly started getting better, and it was not miraculous. The first week back to work, I had to work half shifts because I could not even stand for that long, and I really just had to take it easy getting back into work and my normal life. And because my managers were now involved and they knew a little bit more about what was going on, I guess I didn't really have to, but I felt like I needed to go to Yosemite's doctor and just have everything like written down and set straight with Yosemite and the company that I worked for. But the Yosemite doctor was so full of appointments that they weren't able to get me in until like 2 weeks after my first ER appointment. So there was no way that they were any help at all. So when I finally went to Yosemite's doctor, at this point I had already had 2 doctors and multiple like medical people that I saw at the ER tell me that I had hantavirus. But the Yosemite doctor told me that there was absolutely no way that I had Hanta. It was incredibly rare. The stars had to align perfectly for you to get Hanta. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, I was daily exposed to mice. I live here. I'm not just a tourist that stayed here for one night. If anyone can get Hanta, it's going to be me or someone in my situation. I mean, if you look big picture, it's kind of in Yosemite's best interest to say that I don't have Hanta. And at this point, when they had seen me, I was feeling better because it was weeks after the whole situation. So I guess nobody got hurt and no one has to get in trouble in housing because I'm fine, she doesn't have Hanta. So I got better, but weirdly enough, the mouse situation got even worse, especially in the last 2 weeks that I was there. At this point, 2 of my roommates had finished their jobs and they were back home, and it was just me and my other roommate left. We were moving the furniture around, these big wardrobes that we have, and underneath one of the wardrobes was a giant hole in the floor. And remember how on day 1 the guy said, oh yeah, there's a problem with the floor, but we'll fix it. Yeah, it was not fixed, and that was definitely how all the mice were coming in day after day after day. We put in a maintenance request, but at this point we only had like 2 weeks left, and they basically told us that we were going to be put on a waiting list and it was not top priority. Luckily, one of our neighbors actually worked in maintenance and he heard us talking about the situation, and he came in like an hour later and fixed it, and he just put a metal plate onto the giant hole and fixed it. Me and my roommate ended up leaving for a weekend because we were literally losing our minds just having mice everywhere. And when we came back, there were mice droppings all in our beds, in our sheets, on our pillows. They were nesting in our clothes, in the wardrobes. The mice were everywhere. So I pretty much moved all of my things into the van because I didn't want to deal with these mice. Because all of my belongings were in the van at this point, I was still sleeping in the tent at night, and what we ended up doing was like scooping up all of our bed sheets and like hanging them from the ceiling so that the mice couldn't get into our bed sheets. I did sleep in the van a fair amount, but it's actually illegal to sleep in your car in Yosemite. So not only was I worried about the mice in the tent, but I was also worried about sleeping in the parking lot because I didn't want a ranger to come in the middle of the night and give me a giant ticket. And I think the number one question I'm gonna get asked about is like, why didn't you go and complain and talk to housing? After my first trip to the ER, I definitely could have demanded like a different tent or a dorm or honestly anything, because I had all of this documentation from the ER telling me that I needed to get out of that tent. But at the time, and looking back, I just wanted to get back to my normal life. I had missed so much work. I wasn't making any money. I was like embarrassed because there were rumors going around about like Hanta Girl, and I just wanted to like keep enjoying my summer, put this entire thing behind me and get back to normal life. I also really loved my roommates, and I didn't want to leave that tent. I didn't want to leave the little community that we lived in because we got put in a very prime location right by where I worked. I just didn't want anything to change. I just wanted the mice to be gone. We didn't know about the hole in the floor, so we were optimistic that like if we caught the mouse and then we just stopped having any food in the tent, that it would go away. Looking back, obviously there was this giant hole in the floor. Obviously we probably shouldn't have been in there anyway. It would have needed a huge disinfectant situation going on. Like I should have just asked for a different housing situation. That's not what happened. There are so many things about the situation that I would have done differently. I'm saying that right now. But you have to remember that at the time, I thought I was dying. I was busy being miserable. Like, I couldn't even walk to the bathroom. There was no way that I was going to wage an entire war against the housing department in Yosemite and demand for more safe and better housing. Like, that is not what was on my mind at all. It's not what's on my mind now, even making this video. Like, it honestly was just a very freak thing. But I really think there's some important things to take away from this situation. Number one, if you go to Yosemite, stay away from the mice. If you work in Yosemite, do more than what I did and take it very, very seriously. But number two, I was living in Yosemite in the middle of the woods because I thought that it was fun. I was asking for that adventure and I would not take back anything about it. But some people live in their cars, not for fun, not because they asked for it, not because they wanted an adventure. Some people live on the streets and they have all sorts of health conditions that might be long-term, short-term, more severe, less severe. And for me, it was the first time that I had ever been that far away from home by myself without those everyday amenities that help you get on your feet quicker. Everyone should have the right to safe housing. Luckily, I had my roommates and my friends and my managers to help me out, and I had been there for about a month, so I had kind of built some of those relationships. But the big takeaway here is that community is everything. Like, they helped me get through that. Do I have suggestions for Yosemite and for Airmark, the company that employs all of the people that live in Yosemite? I mean, I'm not really here to like go on a big rant about what they should and should not do. And I think that the mouse situation should be taken as seriously in the employee housing as it is taken in the tourist housing. There is a mouse seen in Curry Village. You are instructed to immediately leave your tent, immediately tell the front desk, and people will come in and like dispose of that mouse. And overall, just take the situation a lot more seriously because they don't want guests to get hurt. But like, employees are important too. So I would say that it just needs to be taken very seriously across the board. Yosemite is basically a small town, and the fact that the nearest ER is like over an hour away, I feel like the Yosemite Clinic should have more appointment slots available. Maybe they could have a 24-hour like physician on duty. Maybe they could prioritize employees needing to come and get their health checked out, because again, I had to wait weeks to even get in. Also, let's say that it would have just been COVID. I still would have been roasting alive in my super hot tent. So maybe they could have a couple of rooms in one of the dorms set aside for when people are seriously ill and when they need a place to like just get back up on their feet if they had COVID or another sickness that might be super contagious, because that could have been like a whole thing where I spread it to everyone living in the little community. So again, I wish that I could have advocated for myself a little bit better, and I think I would have done things very different. But again, I felt really, really crappy. And I was a little preoccupied going to all of my ER visits and trying to get back to work. But yeah, that is my story. Again, don't be scared to work there. I feel like it was a really one-off thing. Overall, a really great experience. Just don't sweep your floors and stay away from the mice and you'll be fine. Next week's video is going to be a lot more positive. I promise you that. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, blah, blah, blah.